Hello and welcome to Wineskins, a program that features the lives of the saints and reflections on the Sunday readings, along with information on a variety of topics and issues from a Catholic perspective. I'm Father Jim Corda. Our program is brought to you through the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts, a division of the Society of St. Paul. Our interview segment today will feature a special edition on St. Columba Cathedral, celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Diocese of Youngstown. We will also get a glimpse into the life and times of St. Kateri Tekakwitha, along with reflections on the readings for this 14th Sunday in Ordinary Time. That and more on Wineskins. To tell us more about marriage and family life in the Diocese of Youngstown is Dave Schmidt.
This July 25th will mark the 50th anniversary of Pope Paul VI's encyclical letter Humanae Vitae, the English title being On Human Life. In Humanae Vitae, Pope Paul maintained that since marriage is the free, total, faithful, and fruitful gift of a man and woman to each other, the act of sexual intercourse between a husband and wife is by nature meant to be both unitive and procreative. This means that the fundamental nature of the marriage act, while uniting husband and wife in the closest intimacy, also renders them capable of generating new life. Because Pope Paul maintained that each and every marital act must, of necessity, retain its intrinsic relationship to the procreation of human life, he taught that artificial contraception, abortion, and sterilization are to be absolutely excluded as lawful means of regulating the number of children. In 1968, when Pope Paul issued this encyclical letter, there was much dissent and resistance to his teaching, as there still is today. While many of his contemporaries held the use of contraceptives as strengthening marital relationships by freeing men and women from the burden of unplanned pregnancy, the Pope had different concerns. First of all, Pope Paul saw artificial birth control as opening wide the way for marital infidelity and a general lowering of moral standards. It is common knowledge that in the decades of the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, when contraceptive use increased dramatically after the introduction of oral contraception, also known as the pill, we see an almost parallel increase in the divorce rate, until it reached its peak of about 50% of marriages ending in divorce. Likewise, during those same decades, we saw a dramatic increase in sex outside of marriage, despite Pope Paul's warning that human beings, and especially the young who are so exposed to temptation, need incentives to keep the moral law, and it is an evil thing to make it easy for them to break that law. Another concern that Pope Paul had with artificial birth control was that a man who grows accustomed to the use of contraceptive methods may forget the reverence due to a woman and disregard her physical and emotional equilibrium, reduce her to being a mere instrument for the satisfaction of his own desires, no longer considering her as his partner, whom he should surround with care and affection. Could it be that the increase in human trafficking, the plethora of sex scandals that our society has been experiencing, and the concerns of women voiced through the Me Too movement are manifestations of the lack of reverence for women foresaw by Pope Paul 50 years ago? Finally, Pope Paul urged that careful consideration should be given to the danger of this power passing into the hands of those public authorities who care little for the precepts of the moral law. In other words, could governments use contraceptives as a means of controlling people against their will? The answer, unfortunately, is yes. For decades, China has had a one-child policy, forcing families that conceive more than one child to pay hefty fines, abandon their newborns, or, in some cases, be forced to undergo an abortion. And our own country has pressured other countries to proliferate the use of contraceptives, a practice decried by our present Pope Francis as ideological colonialism. To conclude, let us remember that in Humanae Vitae, Pope Paul VI did not just speak out against artificial means of birth control, but taught that married couples may take advantage of the natural cycles imminent in the reproductive system and engage in marital intercourse only during those times that are infertile, thus controlling in a way which does not in the least offend moral principles. Such methods fall under the category of natural family planning and are modern, well-developed, and scientifically based, allowing us to work in harmony with the way God created us, rather than against it. To learn more about natural family planning, I urge you to contact the Diocese of Youngstown's Office of Pro-Life Marriage and Family Life. For Wineskins, this is Dave Schmidt.
Saint Kateri Tekakwitha was an Algonquin virgin. To tell us more is Marianne Yeager. She is from St. Christine Church in Youngstown.
Kateri is the first North American Indian to be canonized. She was born in New York and died at the age of 24 near Montreal, Canada. Her mother was an Algonquin who had been baptized at Three Rivers, Quebec, but during an Iroquois raid was carried off to New York, where she was married to a pagan Mohawk chief. 2 children were born of this marriage, but only Kateri survived. Her parents and her brother died in a smallpox epidemic when Kateri was 4 years old. Her face was permanently disfigured, and her eyesight was impaired because of the disease. She was raised by an uncle who at one time had 3 Jesuit missionaries as guests. Kateri received instructions and was baptized on Easter Sunday, 1676. The other Indians were so vehemently opposed to Kateri's conversion that a Jesuit missionary advised her to flee to a settlement near Montreal, where she could freely practice her religion. She reached the settlement in 1677, and for the next 3 years, under the guidance of a Jesuit spiritual director and an older woman named Anastasia, Kateri left a life of great austerity and charity. In 1679, she made a vow of virginity, and a year later she passed to her eternal reward. Her death was the occasion for a great revival of religious fervor among the Christian Indians. She was beatified by Saint Pope John Paul II in 1980 and canonized by Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI on October 21, 2012. Kateri is the lily of the Mohawks that was irrigated by the blood of French Jesuit martyrs. Her life is all the more remarkable when one reads the accounts of the martyrdom of those first missionaries. Once stirred to anger, the Indians practiced satanic cruelty on their enemies. Yet God raised up this saintly maiden in the midst of savagery and brutality. Likewise remarkable is the fact that at age 23, she was able to make a vow of virginity. A celibate life was not held in high regard among the Indians, and being the only Christian, Kateri was subject to constant abuse and insults. Because she refused to work on Sundays, she was branded as lazy, and the Indians made fun of her rosary. When at last she was able to escape to the colony near Montreal, she was able to follow her schedule of prayer and austerity unmolested. Her Jesuit spiritual director wrote about her. Every morning, winter and summer, she was in our church at 4 o'clock. She remained several hours in succession in prayer. If someone asked, "Catherine, do you love the Lord?" "Oh, Father," she would say, and she could say no more. At the moment of her death, she whispered, "Jesus, I love you." This first North American Indian to be raised to the altars of the church is an outstanding example of perseverance in the faith in the midst of persecution. Her strength came from her close and constant union with God in prayer. She is a model for all those who are rejected by their own or are persecuted because of their fidelity to the practice of their religion. For Wineskins, I'm Marianne Yeager.
In 1847, the parish of St. Columba was established. It would eventually become the Cathedral Church when the Diocese of Youngstown was formed in 1943. It was the first parish in the city of Youngstown and in all Mahoning County. The first church built in 1851 was to be on land in Briar Hill that was donated by David Todd, who became the 25th governor of the state of Ohio, the first and so far only governor from Mahoning County. A second church was built in 1864, and in 1897 the third church was erected on the site of the present cathedral. A tragic fire destroyed the cathedral in 1954, but by 1958 a new cathedral was dedicated which serves Catholics today. Romanesque in influence, featuring a high nave and soaring campanile, St. Columba Cathedral is a blend of stone, steel, and glass. However, this central church of the Diocese of Youngstown is more than just a magnificent structure in contemporary church design. It is a monument of faith, dedication, and vision. When the Diocese of Youngstown was created in 1943, St. Columba was designated as the cathedral. The word comes from the Latin cathedra, meaning chair, a sign of the bishop's authority. Soaring almost 132 feet above street level, the campanile or bell tower stands on the site of the original church. To the rear of the campanile is the original 3-ton bell of St. Columba Church, cast in 1857. It was the first church bell in Youngstown and rang out for the first time to call the faithful to midnight mass on Christmas Eve. The vestibule of the cathedral, with its portals of stainless steel and multicolored stained glass, give the visitor a sense of oneness with the outside world, and yet it creates a tranquility and sanctuary into the awesome presence of Almighty God. The door features 50 silhouetted symbols of Catholic theology and faith, including Our Lord, the 7 sacraments, the Church, and the Mother of Christ. Above the door hangs the coat of arms of Bishop George V. Murray. The coat of arms of former Youngstown bishops James A. McFadden, Emmett M. Walsh, James W. Malone, and Thomas J. Tobin hang on the walls of the Eucharistic Chapel. The cathedral is named after the Irish missionary Columba, who lived from 521 to 597. He founded monasteries throughout Ireland and Scotland. His life of heroic virtue and his dedication to God and the Church are colorfully conveyed in the St. Columba window, which rises high above the choir gallery. The window is divided into 49 openings, each adorned with jewel-like medallions and shields, all of which tell the story of Columba's life and faith, along with the sacramental life and faith of the Catholic Church. The choir gallery is also home to the 39-ranked 25-bell Carillon pipe organ, designed by Cassavant Brothers of St. Hyacinthe in Quebec, Canada. The main body of the cathedral, which seats 1,000, is flanked by rows of piers made up of mosaic columns. Above the arches on the interior walls are placed the Stations of the Cross, executed in aluminum relief and bronze. The 14 scenes depict Christ's journey to Calvary. For the visitor entering the cathedral for the first time, the effect is breathtaking. Shades and colors of blue, red, purple, orange, green, and amber create a dazzling rainbow effect reflected from the walls, the floor, and the bronze chandeliers. Antique and precious glass, blown in Germany, England, and Italy, was used for the stained glass windows. The apostles are used for the themes of the nave windows, and appropriately so, since a church is built on the foundation of the apostles, who were also the first bishops. Since every bishop, as ordinary of his diocese, is successor to the apostles, a cathedral church, the bishop's church, could not have a more symbolic theme. St. Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles, also finds its place in the nave windows, as does Mary, the Mother of Christ, and because of her queenship as Queen of the Apostles. The lower windows depict the Apostles' Creed, a sort of catechism of the doctrines of the faith in a symphony of colored glass. A distinct adjunct to the cathedral, yet fully opening into it, is the Eucharistic Chapel, dedicated to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Opposite the tabernacle is the wood-carved relief of the Sacred Heart, opening up to St. Margaret Mary Alacoque, a visitation nun whose special awe and reverence endeared Christ's heart to hers. In the enclosure on either side of the sanctuary are similar hand-carved reliefs of the Blessed Virgin and St. Joseph, her spouse. The sanctuary, with its hand-chiseled travertine marble altar, ambo, and bishop's chair, lends an air of utter simplicity, yet richness to the celebration of the Mass. A dramatic background to the entire sanctuary is a gigantic mosaic panel of satin glass, representing various ethnic roots of the faithful of the Diocese of Youngstown. The upper right portion depicts the creative hand of God, surrounded by the angelic choir. In the center, depicted in heroic size, is the Blessed Mother of God, being touched by Gabriel, the angel of the Annunciation. St. Francis Xavier Cabrini, the first canonized American saint, representing Italians and all immigrants, is at the upper right of the Virgin. The Croatian people recognize their Franciscan martyr, St. Nicholas Tavalic. St. Marin and St. Nicetas are representative of the Maronite and Romanian rites. St. Thomas More, portrayed in his chancellor robes, is the patron of the English people and of the legal profession. St. Martin de Porres, the Dominican lay brother, represents both blacks and Hispanics. St. Patrick, the apostle of Ireland, and St. Casimir, the patron of the Lithuanians, complete the right side. On the Madonna's left are companion saints Peter and Paul, symbolizing the early church and taking their proper place in the church's liturgy. St. Boniface, with his mitre, crozier, and missioner's cross, is the apostle of Germany. Saints Cyril and Methodius represent the Slavs. St. Stephen, bedecked in his traditional crown, represents the Hungarians. Directly below him are St. Louis of France and St. Stanislaus, bishop and martyr and patron of the Poles. The mosaic is not only a work of modern art, it is a faith story of iconography. Hanging on the wall of the sanctuary is the crucifix. Its corpus is made of mahogany from Honduras. Adding to the splendor of the sanctuary are the windows of blue, red, and green, depicting Christ, Mary, and the Christian virtues. The Cathedral of St. Columba, the central church of the Diocese of Youngstown, stands as a house of God, yet it symbolizes in stone, steel, and glass a story of faith, dedication, and vision for countless of Catholic worshippers. For more information on that topic and other related issues, and to listen to Wineskins, visit the website of the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown at www.doy.org. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Imagine missing a meal or two. How would you feel? Now, imagine a child, your child, missing a meal because you could not afford to feed him. This child was receiving a free breakfast and lunch during the school year. Now school is out. Summer is here. 2 meal sources are gone, but the family income is the same. The need for food is the same. Last year, Catholic Charities helped over 5,000 families with emergency food assistance. This urgent need for food is a constant struggle for many families with children. The Summer Hunger Campaign helps Catholic Charities provide food to those who need it most during the summer months. Please support the Summer Hunger Campaign this year. For more information, visit www.ccdoy.org or call Catholic Charities at 330-744-8451.
What have you done for your marriage today?
I gave my wife a hug this morning. I told her I love her.
I did her hair this morning. I think it looks pretty good.
I cooked my husband's favorite breakfast.
I bought her an orchid.
What have I done for my marriage today? I sent my husband a love email.
I read the newspaper to my wife, and it cracked her up. But she's still laughing.
What have you done for your marriage today? Make a change for the better. Need help? Go to foryourmarriage.org, a message from the Catholic Church.
33 million Americans have descended into poverty. And as their futures fall, so does our nation's.
Our song today is from the CD entitled Earthen Vessels. It is by the St. Louis Jesuits 40th Anniversary Edition, which can be found at ocp.org.
Sing to the mountains, sing to the sea, raise your voices, lift your hearts. This is the day the Lord has made, let all the earth rejoice. I will give thanks to you, my Lord, you have answered my plea. You have saved my soul from death, you are my strength and my song. Sing to the mountains, sing to the sea, raise your voices, lift your hearts. This is the day the Lord has made, let all the earth rejoice. Holy, holy, holy Lord, heaven and earth are full of your glory. Sing to the mountains, sing to the sea, raise your voices, lift your hearts. This is the day the Lord has made, let all the earth rejoice. This is the day that the Lord has made, let us be glad and rejoice. He has turned all death to life, sing of the glory of God. Sing to the mountains, sing to the sea, raise your voices, lift your hearts. This is the day the Lord has made, let all the earth rejoice, let all the earth rejoice.
Our scripture reflection for this 14th Sunday in Ordinary Time will be by Father Zach Coulter. He is a parochial vicar at St. Christine Church in Youngstown.
In our second reading this week, St. Paul writes about having a thorn in his side. A thorn in the flesh was given to me, an angel of Satan, to beat me, to keep me from being too elated. 3 times I begged the Lord about this, that it might leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. This is the seeming contradiction of Christianity. Christianity always focuses on the weak. We uphold the poor over the rich. We uphold the weak over the strong. We focus on the uneducated, the sick, the dying, those who are the greatest, the weakest and the poorest among us. The greatest symbol of this can be seen in the crucifix, the central image of our faith. From the outside, it seems to be a symbol of weakness, a man in his death throes, at his weakest, in defeat. But through the Christian eyes, we know that the crucifix stands for so much more. Behind the crucifix lies the resurrection, and it is only through that weakness, that death of Christ, that we could come to the glory of new life. And so we know that that weakness is not true weakness, but strength. So too, in each of our lives, we struggle. So often we find ourselves falling again and again into the same sins, the same traps, the same temptations. So often we go back to confession and have to confess the same thing over and over again. And yet, even in this, there is beauty. Even in this, we can see God at work, because it is through this failure of ourselves that we can truly appreciate God's mercy for us. When Jesus Christ was carrying his cross to Calvary, he fell 3 times. We are going to fall a lot more than he is. But what did he do? He picked himself up and kept on carrying that cross. So too in our life, we will fall carrying the cross that Christ has given us. But so too with his help, we will pick ourselves up. We will carry on that burden and see it as what it truly is, a sign of love, something that can keep us humble so that we can always know that it is only through God's love that we come to true life and to true salvation. We see this in today's gospel. Jesus is seemingly weak. He is rejected by his hometown. A prophet is not without honor except in his native place. And because of the lack of faith, he is not able to work the wonders that he has worked in other such places. So too, we must remember that our mission is to go out into the world and work wonders. But we cannot become dissuaded when the world turns its back on us, when its world challenges us and doesn't like the message that we have to say. The message of Jesus Christ is a challenge. It has been from the beginning, and it will be for all time. So, as Christians, we must have the fortitude, the strength, the courage to go out into the world, to risk everything to follow Christ, and to risk being called hypocrites, because we are all hypocrites. All of us are speaking from a point of view of failure. All of us have sinned. All of us have failed to live up to the love that God has given us. But that's okay. It's okay because God knew that. God, despite our weaknesses, still extends his hand in forgiveness, still extends his hand in love. Even despite all of our own weakness, God sent his only Son to become one of us, to accept our weaknesses, our frailty, so that he could save us. And it was through Christ becoming man that all of us were elevated to a new level of being. And so it is through weakness that we attain true strength. For Wineskins, I'm Father Zachary Coulter.
The life of a prophet is not easy. The power of God manifests itself most clearly in overcoming a difficulty, not in being easily successful. How is the power of God manifest in you? Wineskins is made possible by the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts. Wineskins is produced by CTNY, the Catholic Telecommunications Network of Youngstown. I'm Father Jim Corda, thanking you for being with us. Have a blessed Sunday, and may God be with you.